At this time, we are going to be inviting Dr. Sonia Doi, who will be talking about the Re-incarnating Spirit. Dr. Sonia Doi serves as an Associate Professor of Medicine and Director of Nephrology Research Laboratory at the Uniformed Services University, Bethesda, Maryland. She is currently the President of the United States Spiritist Medical Association, Vice President of the International Spiritist Medical Association, and also President of the Allan Kardec Spiritist Society of Maryland. Please join us in welcoming our friend, Dr. Sonia Doi.
Wow, I'm here and I'm happy. And it feels good. I feel so humble talking after those giant speakers that talked this morning. But we need to do it. So the topic today is the reincarnating spirit. And you heard this beautiful presentation by Dr. McCarthy. And I would like to start, let me see now here, with this quote. Let me do Dr. Schwartz, Gary Schwartz now. How many of you know this quote? Yeah, I think many people know. Do you know from whom this quote is? Pierre de Chardin, who lived, he was way ahead of the time. 1881, 1955. He was a Jesuit priest, but he came to understand, he was in the religion realm, but he came to understand creation, human beings in a different way because he was also a scientist. And studying science in the religion, trying to put it together, he wrote beautiful work, and all. But the problem is, he was expelled from church. So, but this is a quote that many of you know, and I started with this quote because this is what this talk is about. Many people still in the material have still that materialistic concept that life goes from cradle to grave. Many people still believe that life starts at the moment of birth. But in embryology, the science that studies the evolution of the human formation, the human body, has already determined long time ago that life begins at conception. So this is, by the way, the same view of Spiritism. Life begins at conception. But for the materialist thoughts, concepts, that life begins at birth, or even those who consider that life begins at conception, they think that during that 9 months of pregnancy, there's only a body being formed there, biological life, no consciousness, no awareness. And it was due to the studies and observations reported especially by psychologists, psychotherapists, and it was already mentioned here, Dr. Thomas Verney, Dr. David Chamberlain were pioneers in this study, and we had the privilege to have here today Dr. Wendy McCarthy, who has done an extraordinary study in this area. So thanks to these people who not only observed the cases through psychotherapy, so they were seeing people that, adults who came with their own problems, and through psychotherapy, regression, they start going towards that phase, this gestational phase. And they start to remember things, they start to report things. So they were not just, writing down, they started to study it. And they started to verify the veracity of these cases. Together with this, and Dr. McCarty mentioned that, there are also some memories that surface with no hypnotherapy, and they are spontaneous memories. Usually this occurs, with toddlers, 3 to 6 years old, and they are vivid memories or they relate to something, and I'm not going to expand here because Dr. McCarty has her experience here. She shared with us some of the cases, and she has a number of cases. If you also look at the books of Dr. David Chamberlain, The Windows of the Womb, you see many, many cases in the extraordinary account of cases of both memories that surfaced on hypnotherapy and memories that surfaced after with no hypnosis. So, interesting, we see that with all these reports, there are several types of perception. So there is a perception during that time, and there are different types of perception. Dr. David Chamberlain reports about 12 types of perception, and I just put here some, just for us to entertain some thoughts here. So the intrauterus environment, the perception of twins that Dr. McCarty referred to, and there are other cases reported by Thomas Verney and Chamberlain. Sentiments, emotions that, from the mother, from some relative around. External environment, so their perception from the environment outside of the uterus, like auditive, like visual. I just, out of curiosity, anybody here had that perception? Or know somebody who had that type of perception? It's kind of more common than we think. But auditive perception, for example, many people report that they heard something or they remember a song brings some meaning, some memories. But the most important are the visual perceptions. How can a baby that is inside of the womb have any visual perception if we just talk about perception through the corporeal, the material organs? David Chamberlain's book even talk about stories of consciousness before the formation, the maturation of the brain, and perception of intelligent being, intelligent type of perception. Just to, this is not meant, this is a chart of embryology, it's not meant to bring you, to tell you all the phases of embryology. The important in this chart, let me see if I can, from here are weeks of gestation, from week number 1 all the way to term, all the phases of maturation. And we see here, for example, let's see, that the baby can hear sounds. If it's like a very loud sound in the room, they can actually hear this, because at this time, around the week number 17 to 20, something like this, 17 to 19, the ears are formed. So theoretically, they can hear with their own organs, through their organs. The eyes begin, a formation of the eyes begin all the way here, but the eyelids, at some point when the eyelids form, the eyelids are closed, and they only open the eyelids at week 26. This is only to bring us to think, because sometimes we hear these stories of perception and it doesn't dawn to us, okay, the baby can sense. And we are still thinking of the baby inside of the womb. But now, it's important to understand then that this awareness, this perception is independent, is outside of that body that's being formed, is somewhat linked to it, but is independent, is out. Otherwise, how can we explain many of these perceptions that occur early in the phase of gestation? Visual perceptions. We could not explain that. So we have to understand then that these perceptions, before the organs are completely formed, especially the visual perceptions, they are accommodated by the concept of perception of an out-of-body consciousness. And that's the same out-of-body consciousness that other, that's too much. Let's see if I can come back. Electronics, that happened. It's the same out-of-body consciousness that those who study near-death experience report. And I like to mention this work because Dr. Pim van Lommel, I don't know, if you're familiar with it, he's a physician in the Netherlands, and he is a renowned cardiologist in Europe. He decided to do a prospective study in out-of-body near-death experience, and for every case, he studied this over a period of years. Every case that in the ICU came to cardiac arrest would have electrocardiogram, electroencephalogram, so that he would attest when that line would be flat, meaning death. And then when this person was revived, those who survived, came back, he did questions. He applied a questionnaire with several questions, and then he analyzed. His work was published in a very important scientific journal called The Lancet. Very, very difficult to publish in this. So it was a very credible work. The important thing about this paper is that Dr. van Lommel observed cases with such a detail. And at the end, a discussion of his paper, he says, I have no doubt that a consciousness independent of the body exists and has the perception, awareness of what's going on while the organic body is dead. Flatline electroencephalogram, the brain was dead during a certain period of time. He's very honest to say, though, I know this exists. The only thing I don't know is how to explain it. So this consciousness is exactly the same, something that independs of the body, of the organs. And what is actually this consciousness? And one say is the soul or the spirit. In just to bring you a little bit, some people call soul or others call spirit. And there's like a general idea that the soul is what is living the physical body. When the physical body dies, then the soul becomes, the name changes to spirit. But it's basically the same thing. So we can say soul or we can say the spirit. The idea that the soul would be detaching this perception, this consciousness is detaching from the body after the body dies is ancient, and this is a depiction of ancient Egyptian culture. But the important thing is, as I said before, this consciousness that is independent of the body exists when, in cases of death or near-death experiences, but also during that prenatal phase. It's exactly the same phenomena. Now, that cycle, after death, the spirit is detached from the body and then comes back in the child during at the time of conception. This is just not one cycle, one that we could call incarnation, right? This cycle repeats many times. And again, like Dr. Schwartz said, this is an evidence-based concept. And here is, I think many people here have already mentioned or will mention it in the next lectures. You're going to hear about Dr. Ian Stevenson, who wrote, 300 papers, 14 books on reincarnation. He did real research. He was a professor at the UVA. And his follower, Dr. Jim Tucker, who also works at UVA, started working with him in these cases of reincarnation. He would have a report, and he would go over to look for evidence that that really happened. The same thing was done by Dr. Jim Tucker. Dr. Jim Tucker was looking specifically together with Dr. Ian Stevenson when he passed on birthmarks. Children that were born with birthmarks, with birth defects, and they were going backwards looking for a person who had that experience in a certain place that was reported by that child. So they would have memories and go after the memories to verify whether that exists, that there was any report, any remembrance, any data about that. Dr. Jim Tucker decided to finish the work that was left by Dr. Ian Stevenson, but he decided to do his own work, and this is his last book, Return to Life, published earlier this year. But the real pioneer in this area was Dr. Helen Wambach. In the mid-60s, conducted a 10-year survey of past life recalls under hypnosis. More than 1,000 subjects. Imagine this in the 60s. She wrote only 2 books, Reliving Past Lives and Life Before Life, Life Before Life in 1978. And at the end of her studies, she wrote, I don't believe in reincarnation. I know it. Because she really studied. It was a scientific study. She was looking case after case, more than 1,000, and she had no doubt. So we see these reports still today, and many people still see it and don't know what to make out of it. This was a very interesting case. I don't know if many of you have seen it, but it was on TV, it was on YouTube, everything. And this was on prime time, was shown on prime time TV. It's the case of James Leininger, the little boy that at 2 years of age had memories, precise memories of a past life as a pilot of the World War II, whose name was also James. And I'm going to show you a little piece of this. Then, if you like, you go to YouTube and you see the whole primetime show.
With each passing month, little James Leininger seemed to be peeling back memories of a past life.
Ooh, plane.
Vivid memories that scared and astonished his parents.
Bruce had always said, what kind of plane did you fly? And he said, a Corsair.
Yeah.
He said a Corsair?
He said the word Corsair.
Not only did James remember flying a Corsair, he demonstrated knowledge of the plane's peculiarities, like the time he was flipping through a book about planes when he was 4.
And he got to the Corsair and he said, "That's a Corsair." And he goes, "You know what? They used to get flat tires all the time."
In fact, historians and pilots agree that the plane's tires took a lot of punishment on landing. Of course, this is a fact that could easily be found in books or on TV. But then, James began to offer up the kinds of specific details his parents say are harder to explain away.
Another night, Bruce had come in and he said, "Do you remember where your plane took off?" And he said, "It took off of a boat." "Do you remember the name of your boat?" "Natoma." "Do you remember what your name was?" And he'd always say, "James." His name is James. It never really occurred to us. We thought he just wasn't understanding the question. So I said, "Do you remember any friends or anyone else that you flew with?" And he said, Jack Larson.
Bruce began doing some research. Almost immediately, he discovered that the Natoma was an actual ship, a small aircraft carrier in the Pacific called the Natoma Bay. And Jack Larson, the Navy buddy little James recalled? Well, it turns out there was a pilot named Jack Larson who served aboard the Natoma Bay. In fact, he's alive and well and living in Arkansas.
And it was like, holy mackerel. I mean, really, you could have poured my brains out of my ears. And I just couldn't believe it.
And there were more clues. Around this time, James began signing crayon drawings and other artwork, James III.
One day I asked him why he's calling himself James III. Well, it's because I'm the third James. And every once in a while you ask him that today, and he'll still say the same thing.
James III, because in the previous life he was James Jr. But anyway, so this is a very, very interesting report. It's one of the reports that I find with the most details. But this knowledge of reincarnation comes from Spiritism way in 1857 when Kardec started writing the books, the Spirit's book, published the Spirit's book, and we see, for those who are not familiar with Kardec, there's other speakers are going to talk about him too. I just want to tell you that he was an educator. He had a passion for teaching, he had a passion for learning, and he was a professor over about 20 years. He wrote 4 books on several topics here, but it was under the pen name Allan Kardec that he wrote the books on Spiritism. He wanted to separate, that's why he chose Allan Kardec versus his true name, Hippolyte Léon Denisard. He wanted to separate what he was writing on Spiritism from his professional life. But we find even more details on recounts of reincarnation, and not only accounts of reincarnation, but details on how this happened and the whole study about it through the medium Francisco Xavier from Brazil. His first book was published in 1932. He wrote 468 books, psychographed by several spirits, but I think I skipped one slide. One of the spirits that through whom came a lot of concepts on reincarnation and details was the spirit André Luiz. And this is a very important book called Missionaries of the Light, written in 1945. Through this book, we learn that we have spiritual guides that helps in the planning, in the preparation, even in the linking of the incarnating spirit to that fertilized egg. André Luiz, the spirit André Luiz, was a doctor during his incarnate life. We also learned that there is a preparation of the parents to be before the incarnating spirit comes. Sorry, but this is going... I'm pushing too hard. No. Okay. So one of the aspects that I don't have much time to talk here, but you're going to hear from other speakers too, is the law of cause and effect. That is a very important law, which is also known as karma by the other cultures, that governs the reincarnation, governs the plans for reincarnation, even the bodies that are going to be formed. Dr. Marlene Nobre is going to show you a beautiful explanation in details about this, how this affects the genome, the formation of how the genes are selected and so forth, so on. But all this has a purpose. And what is the purpose? Is to acquire new moral values, to evolve, to atone, to reconciliate. So our experiences from the past are taken in consideration during the planning for the new life to be. All this has a great, important purpose: evolving. We are evolving. We are getting more knowledge. We are becoming better. So there are lessons to come. We are here like we were in a school. Like the children that go to school, before they go to school, before they start school, they are at home, they eat whatever they want, what time they want, they go take a nap, whatever. They go to school, there's a schedule, nap time, lunch time, playing time, right? So same thing here. We come and there is a schedule that we have to follow to take the best on learning, the best learning experience. So we lose a little bit of the freedom that we would have in the spirit realm. It's interesting that I found this hypnotherapist, Dr. Michael Newton, who he did a lot of hypnotherapy, And in some cases, he stumbled on patients that would not only go to a past life, but they would go to a period between two lives. They were, they would not go, okay, I jumped from this life and I'm talking about my past life. No, they were talking about experiences during one life and another. And he then decided he developed techniques and he decided to do some studies. And he describes steps between death and rebirth, including the law of cause and effect, including the experiences that we have to learn, the experiences of atonement. And it's very, very similar. I was actually impressed to see that all the steps, he describes about 10 steps, from the point of death to the next incarnation, and everything, even the preparation, the design for the new life, talking about the design of the body and everything. Very, very, very similar to everything that Kardec described way back in 1857. He wrote some books that I mentioned here: Journey of Souls, Destiny of Souls, Life Between Lives. And it's a very interesting technique that he developed to that gives with his techniques now gives more body to what we have already studied in Spiritism. So the cycle is not just that materialistic cycle, but the cycle has a second turn. This picture is from the movie No Solar. So here are spirits in the spirit realm. So we come and go, and we come and go again. This cycle repeats many, many times. So I come back to the quote of Pierre de Chardin, "We are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience." But I would like to propose a small change here and to say we are spiritual beings having multiple human experiences. Thank you very much.